So my name is Nancy Gibson. I'm a Senior Associate Director of Admissions at Denison University. And I've been in admissions and higher education for 26 years. Started off down the road at Capital University worked there for 6 years, and then headed over to Denison after that. So certainly is great to be able to come and chat with you tonight, and then I'll let my colleague introduce Michelle.
Hi, I'm Michelle Brown. I am at The Ohio State University. I've been in higher ed and admissions for 28 years. And 5 of those at Xavier University in Cincinnati, the rest here at Ohio State. Besides working in the admissions office, I also oversee the Ohio State Academy program, which is our College Credit Plus program. So if you have questions about that, I can also talk about that afterwards because we don't really have time.
So obviously there's a lot of hype with the college admissions process, and I think a lot of times people view it as a mysterious thing. And certainly in the headline, toughest year ever in college admissions, student applies at 20 colleges. Most recently, one student gets into all 8 Ivy League schools. There's a lot out there. What is that hype all about, and is it necessary? No, it's not necessary, and I think a lot of times it makes people very, very nervous about the process, and it just seems really daunting. We're going to talk a little bit about a holistic review and what that means. Ultimately, we are looking at each individual student. We are picking apart their application. We're making a full assessment of, is this a student that would be a good fit for our institutions? And, can they persist in the classroom and be successful? So when we're doing a holistic review, we're looking at all those components versus just to connect the dots and, hey, you're in or you're denied. It doesn't work like that. So in that holistic review, that's what that means. And then there's always a confusion between best schools and most selective schools and all the lists out there and U.S. News and World Report and all those kinds of things can make it very, very confusing. But in the end, you want your student to have a place that's a good fit for them, where they have a great experience and then go on and do amazing things. So the hype is not necessary, even though it's happening.
And an important thing to realize is that the hype is only about a very small number of colleges out there. When you hear all the news, it's a very select number of colleges. Most colleges have either open enrollment, which means that if you have a high school diploma or a GED, you can get in, or have liberal enrollment, that if you meet a minimum baseline grade point average and test score, you're automatically admitted. What we're going to spend time talking about is the number of schools who are selective, and even selectivity goes on a whole continuum from, oh my God, how did you actually get into that college because nobody does, 5% or less, to most people get in, but we are screening for certain things. And the most important thing to realize is that selectivity is driven by supply and demand. If there are a whole lot more students applying than there are seats in the class, then it's a much harder process to be accepted. And it can vary from year to year. If a school has a banner year, they win a national championship, and all of a sudden a bunch of applications come in, that can have an effect. It doesn't affect us because people expect us to. That's what my boss used to say. But some of those Cinderella teams do see huge increases in applications because all of a sudden a bunch of people have heard their names. So selectivity is one of those things that isn't an inherent good or bad about a school. It's really about the marketplace and how attractive they are to high school students.
So there are different types of admissions in this process, and some of this may be very familiar to you, some of this may be new terminology. The first is early decision. Early decision basically is binding, and that means that if you apply early decision, you actually sign an agreement saying that if I'm admitted, I will enroll. Students can only apply early decision to one school. So I always tell students, if you've done your whole college search and there's a school that's at the top of your list, and whenever they say yes, you're going, then it makes sense to apply early decision. But if you've got a bunch of schools up there that you're interested in, and you're going back and forth, and you're not sure, then early decision doesn't make any sense. It's truly, if it's your top choice, it's where you want to be. At the early decision level, students can be admitted, they can be denied, or they can be deferred, which means that a university may say, hey, you know, we'd like to see that first semester of grades. Or they may say, we need to see some additional test scores before they offer a decision for them. So they may defer that decision, is basically what that means. Early action is where a college will let you know early, so they'll let a student know early that they've been admitted. So let's say in November, a student finds out, wow, okay, I have been admitted, but you actually have until May 1st to make a final decision. So May 1st for us is right around the corner, so there's a lot of craziness in our offices right now. But with early action, it's next, because that way you know early, but you've got some time still to decide. Right? Go ahead.
Early decision, that's one.
Only one.
Okay. And early action, that's you apply to schools under early action?
That's right. And that's generally going to be an earlier deadline date then.
Right.
So if you apply early decision and they deny you, can you ever reapply, or you're just denied?
You're just denied.
Is it
Yeah.
harder if you go early decision, or is it the same standard?
It will vary based on the school, because typically in early decision, if you apply early decision, the pool usually is smaller, so you're being compared with a smaller number. Oftentimes the acceptance rates are higher because these are students that's their number one choice, it's where they want to be. So a perfect example, for us, our early decision acceptance rate is about 85%, and at regular is about 47%. So very, very different. The pool is smaller, the students are very strong typically, so you don't have as significant, like you don't have a lower acceptance rate at that point. It typically tends to be a little bit higher. Also advantages for just being done with the process, which is nice. You're finished, it's over, you're enrolled, it's done. But if you do apply ED, you get admitted, you enroll, you have to withdraw all other applications out there. Okay? So we really mean it. And if we find out, if somebody's enrolled with us early decision, but we find out they've applied to another school, which I had that happen, we will call that other institution and say, they are enrolled at Denison. So it is we have an agreement between universities that we are going to respect them. Okay, you never know when that's going to happen. That's a new one.
Well, that's still on.
Well, it is. Okay, so that's okay. Can you see? Can everybody see? Okay. We'll talk in the numbers. That's okay. We're going to keep going. So regular decision is where basically a school has a deadline. Okay, this is when you have to apply by, and then we'll get our decision out to you. A lot of times, if they've got a deadline with regular decision, everybody will get back to you, hear back from a school at the same time. So for us, we have a deadline for our regular decision of January 15th. We get back to everyone by mid-March at the same time. So everybody's got to wait to hear back from us. Okay? Rolling admission is basically similar to early action, where basically you're hearing early, and as you apply 2 to 3 weeks later, you can get a decision back. Okay? So when I worked at Capitol, it was rolling admission. So when I worked there, the student would apply, 2 to 3 weeks later, we gave them a decision.
Is that certain schools or?
Depends upon the school.
Okay.
Yep. So that's where it's really important to look at what types of admission they offer, what the deadlines look like, and they typically will give you a response date that they'll get back to you by. And then certainly final grades matter. It's very important. A lot of times people don't realize that if a student's been deferred, for example, and we're waiting for those grades, how you do can make a big difference with whether or not you get admitted if you've been deferred. And also one thing I always like to mention is you actually have a tentative admission decision until we get your final transcript. So you want to continue, for your students, want to continue to do well, because if we see that a student's had a really tough second semester and everything has tanked, their admission could be revoked. And people don't realize that. So it's all tentative based on that final transcript.
So applications are not going to just be thrown out on the floor and those people get admitted and those people get denied. They are read by admissions officers, and typically they're going to be read by at least 2 people because we want to make sure that we are giving the student as fair and even an evaluation as possible. It will depend on the college. You're going to hear us say that a lot. It depends on the college. Some schools, the students are reviewed by the person that's responsible for that geographic territory. And that's the first person to read because they know the schools, they know what all the situations are, and so they have a lot of input on, yes, based on what's happening at this school, this is a great fit. Other colleges, like Ohio State, do a more random reading process because I don't have a geographic territory, so I wouldn't read any. And other people, like the person who covers the Columbus territory, wouldn't be able to do anything but read applications because there's so many that come in. So ours are done more on just a random basis, you get who you get. There's usually going to also be a second reviewer who is going to get that different perspective, that more objective set of eyes, so that there's somebody who is not necessarily as familiar with that individual school, but who is looking for, is this kid hitting the kind of benchmarks that we want on our campus? And then you will see that we'll have a committee in many cases. And sometimes it might be that the entire office comes together and discusses every single application. You might see circumstances where Nancy and I both read this student, we both agreed, yeah, he's a great student, and so there's no need for the committee to consider him. But on this student, I'm fighting for him, and Nancy's saying no. And so we go to the committee to come together and duke it out and get an answer. But again, it's not usually just a quick decision. It's something that we're going to spend a lot of time and try to make sure that we are truly giving the student a very thorough and objective read in the process.
So in the academic review, we're obviously focusing most of our time on the transcript. We want to make sure that the students can do well academically, persist in the classroom, and ultimately graduate. So we're looking at course selection. So what's available at the school, and then what does the student actually take? You know, did the school have 10 AP courses that they offered, and the student didn't take any, or they took one? Was it a school, because every school is different, was it a school that didn't offer any AP or honors or advanced courses, but did that student take the most rigorous curriculum that they offered? Because each school is different. We look at grade trends. So was it an upward trend? Did a student maybe struggle in their freshman year, but then clearly they have, kicked it in gear and they're doing really well after that? Or are there some downward trends? Did all of a sudden something happen? They got sick in their junior year. All of a sudden things plummeted in their first semester. We're looking at all of those things. And that's also where the guidance counselor can be really helpful with providing any additional information, or the student for that matter. The strength or weakness of the subject area. Are we going along through the transcript and we're saying, wow, great, A's and B's, and they're doing really great. But clearly math is a struggle for them. But that's where we're seeing a C here, and a B minus there, and another C there. So we can absolutely tell by looking at that if there are certain areas that are tough for a particular student. The level of rigor, again, we're looking at, did they challenge themselves? Did they go that extra mile? If the school required, it kind of goes down to the next one, but if the school required 2 years of a language, did the student go ahead and take 3? Are they challenging themselves? Did the student have an opportunity to take college level courses? And what is the rigor of those particular courses to get them ready for college? Some may take an AP or IB curriculum within their high school. Other students may be able to get actually on a college campus and take courses in that way. So we're looking at all of those kinds of things. And in that case, we certainly need a transcript from that particular institution as well. And then the strength of the senior schedule. Is this a student who took fluffy courses, is what we call it? Did they take a lot of fluff in their senior year? Meaning, if you had to pick between taking AP Bio and woodshop, did the student take woodshop? It's like, what? Where's the rigor? So we want to make sure that they've got a strong senior schedule, because ultimately that's getting them ready for college. Some students in their minds are like, hey, I'm going to take it easy, I've worked hard up to this point, I'm going to just kind of let it flow. That, as far as the college admission side of things, is not what we want to see. We want to see a student continuing to work hard. Do I see a hand?
Yeah. I have a question about that, because in Grandview, we have the higher grading scale.
Okay.
We are next year transitioning to the standard grading scale, but we currently grade on a college level.
Okay.
So how does our GPA, with our students, they're juniors this year, so we'll be setting this out, the GPA will be half college, half our current
Yeah.
grading system, and then half of the new grading system.
So what schools do is they will give us a high school profile, which will explain all of that, or if that's not already written in the profile,
It
usually
is.
is it, okay.
Jenny added it.
Is it Jane? Okay, we know Jane over there. So basically what will happen is we'll look at that, and every high school has a profile for the most part. There's some that don't, but that's basically our key that we use to know that particular school. So then we can understand, okay, that's what their grading scale's like, then it shifted, so then we can look, and that goes back to that holistic review. We're looking at each individual student from their particular high school with whatever that curriculum is set as, or grading scale, or what have you.
And I think we hear frequently, a lot of times, people ask the question, if you have these students side by side, and they're exactly alike, except for this student has a little bit of this, that's a very false dichotomy. We are never putting students in this death match about who gets a spot.
Right.
We're looking at each student as an individual, and then we're saying, how does the student fit in the pile as a whole? So it's not one of those things, because no two students are truly exactly alike, except for just one small little.
Would you say that the way you do that is common across the country? Say my son's looking at going to San Diego State. We probably know people from Grandview's been there, or maybe one, and they're going to get this transcript. They don't know the school. It's a small school in Ohio. Where would they know us? Are they going to look at him the same way as you would know, and say, we know Jane and Chauncey over at Grandview, we know the school?
That's where the profile comes in
Comes in.
handy, because we
Yeah.
read applications from across the
All
world.
over the country.
Yeah, so
That
that's
can work.
common practice.
So it's
Yes.
common practice of you.
Amongst
Right.
admissions, that's right.
Okay.
If you're doing a thorough job,
Yes.
yeah, every admissions office is going to rely on that profile. So it's
Okay.
really challenging for us if we don't have a profile.
So it's
And
really
when-
important that we get that
That
sent with
profile.
our
That's right.
peers.
And the counselor will send that with their transcript. That's usually just common practice.
Okay.
When we actually go and speak to counselors, we speak to high school counselors, we will say, make sure the following things are in your profile. So we do presentations like that as well, because that's what's going to help us really truly understand what that particular high school is like.
And Jamie actually sent that to me for me to take a look at it before she finalized.
And we'll both get calls like that, like, hey, we're thinking of doing this, what do you think?
Yeah.
Right,
Mhm.
so especially if you're in one of the suburban high schools where you have a good number of counselors, they know that. That's something that they're definitely gonna put some emphasis on.
Exactly.
Okay. So, part of the academic review is obviously looking at grade point average or grade class rank. And again, we're going to look at it in the context of this particular school. I can't tell you how many times over the years I've gotten the call, well, our school is so much better than that bad school. And if my student had gone to that bad school, they would have a 4 point. And we never can judge what a student might have had. We have to go off of the grades as they are recorded on the transcript that we receive. So we try to look at it in context, and again, as Nancy was saying, we look and we see, oh, this kid's got a whole bunch of A's, and oh, that one class must have been a doozy, because that's where things didn't go well. That's not going to kill a kid. But if the transcript is all C's and D's, and only one A, well, that tells us something too. So we're looking at it more in terms of the whole picture, and it's, again, how does the student stack up compared to the entire pool of students? How much have they challenged themselves and done strong work? I love to see an upward grade trend. I hate to see a downward grade trend. And then test scores. I'll tell you, test scores are what people think is the be-all and end-all. It is one piece of the puzzle. I would much rather see a student who has very strong grades and a lower test score than a kid who has a great, outstanding test score and really mediocre grades, because that tells me that that kid is not working to their potential. So test scores are a piece of the puzzle that we use and can have an impact, but it's not usually the final deciding factor. But if you have a kid who's a great kid, who does great in the classroom and is really bringing it every day, but does poorly on standardized tests, there are still going to be options like test optional schools.
Yeah, so we're a test optional school. We've been a test optional school at Denison for about 7 years now. And we really decided to go that direction because there were a lot of students that weren't even considering Denison because they'd see our average ACT of 29 and say, there's no way I can even be considered. And there are a lot of students out there that do extremely well in the classroom, have AP, honors, advanced classes, doing extremely well, maybe have 3.8 GPA, but they have a 22 ACT. And that's not reflective of their ability. So we basically give students the option of saying, yes, use my standardized test scores, or no, don't use my standardized test scores. There are some colleges that are test optional that will ask for another essay or a graded paper, or they may have them do something in addition. For us, we don't ask students to do anything in addition. We're basically just looking at everything in their common application. But it is a nice option to know that there are a lot of schools out there that do have that. I never tell students not to take the standardized test, though, because you absolutely want to make sure that your students have taken the ACT and the SAT if possible, because you never know if there's a college that's going to pop up that they're really interested in, and they've just taken the ACT, and that school requires the SAT. So make sure that you're covered there. I always say, definitely make sure that you're taking those standardized tests, but there are options.
So you recommend taking both, no matter what?
At least once.
At least once. I suggest it because we actually, most colleges will look at an equivalency and use whichever's the higher. There's also a thing called super scoring, which you may or may not have heard of. That's basically where we're using the highest of the sub-scores. So if a student's taken the ACT 3 different times, we're going to use their highest English score, their highest math score, if that makes sense. So it just depends upon the college. Some colleges will take whatever their highest composite is, like Ohio State. They're going to take whatever the highest composite is that they've done. So it just depends. But I always suggest at least take them once. So that way you've got a couple, they're different tests. So that way you've got a couple different ways to measure that. Okay, sure. So essays. So we'll just kind of go really quickly here. I don't even know what our time looks like. I can't see anything.
It's 8:39.
Oh, okay. So we'll go quickly. Then we'll get to any other questions. So with essays, basically, just really quickly, ultimately we want an essay that's going to grab our attention. We absolutely don't want students to retell us or give us lists of things that are already in their application. Okay? And I always say it's a way to speak to the admissions committee. Tell us something unique. I had a girl that wrote about a red truck that got passed down through the family, and it was her turn to have the red truck, and it was hilarious. But that really stood out to me, and it also told me a lot about her family. So students absolutely can have a lot of different really unique topics that or unique things that they're writing about that will tell us a lot. Also, it's important to be appropriate with the topic, subject, and language. Students really need to think about it. Is this a topic that I really want the admissions committee to know about me? Because it's gotten, over the years, incredibly different with when we first started admissions years and years ago with what students are sharing. And so it's really important for them to kind of think that through. Don't use texting language in your essays, proper grammar, and all of those things. We do look at how well the essay is written. We had another, in our previous session, they asked, well, how can you tell if the student actually wrote it or if somebody else wrote it? We try and do our best. Usually if we see that writing is very different from how they answered maybe a short answer question to the essay, or if they have poor English grades, but all of a sudden they've got this amazing, incredible essay, so we can do some investigation in that way, but we're hoping it's theirs. And then obviously to really think about what do we want the reader to be left with. What's most important.
Nothing's gonna ring, obviously, so we're just gonna, if you wanna wrap it up, and we'll leave everybody back to the cafeteria.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much, guys.
Sure.
Just be careful, please.
Sure.
It's important that the student be the one to write the essay, and it is important that the student be the one to complete the application. It's kind of is one of those nails on a chalkboard when a mother calls and says, I'm filling out my son's application. That's their responsibility, so that's definitely something we're going to look at.
Parents love to edit.
Yes.
Sure. Absolutely.
You can have some editorial and suggestions, but it really should reflect who the student is, because they're the ones going to be in our classrooms, and they're doing the work.
Well, and my daughter's a sophomore in college, and obviously my background's admissions. She wrote her essay. I basically glanced at it for grammatical things, and that was that. I didn't change anything, and so it really needs to be their own. Just quickly, recommendations are, the only thing about recommendations is that we want to make sure that your student has connected with their counselor, because they have to write a recommendation about them. So if your child does not know who their counselor is, it's very important that they do. Extracurricular activities.
Extracurricular activities are helpful because it tells us that the kid is going to be doing something on our campus. They don't have to do 1,000 things. One time I did a presentation and I had a bunch of people come up and say, my child isn't doing any sports, is that okay? Yeah, they should do what they like. The best thing is something that they're doing because they're interested in it. And if they do one thing but they do it all 4 years and they get into it more and more, that's great. So they don't need to be just doing everything under the sun. And they need to balance. The grades still have to come first. Extracurriculars don't outweigh everything else.
Does it look bad if they only do sports?
No, if a student is doing all sports and putting in a lot of energy and time, we recognize that that is a very significant